My wife never had to tell me she didn't want me anymore. I could feel it every time her body changed the second I touched her. It was never dramatic. That would have been easier to confront. It was always something small. A shoulder tightening. A quiet sigh. Her eyes staying on her phone while I stood there feeling stupid for wanting basic affection from my own wife. Her name is Megan. We'd been married 10 years, together for 13, and for most of the time I never thought I'd become one of those men who could feel his marriage slipping without being able to prove it. We were not some fake perfect couple, but we were solid. Familiar. Comfortable in the good way. We had routines, inside jokes, and the kind of closeness that makes a house feel lived in. Then, little by little, Megan started acting like I was getting in the way of a life she was already halfway out of. At first, I blamed stress. That's what reasonable husbands do before they let their minds go somewhere darker. Megan worked in marketing for a home design company, and that spring her job got messy. 2 people on her team got laid off, deadlines tightened, and suddenly she was carrying more than she used to. She brought her laptop home more often. Answered emails during dinner. Took calls in the living room with that clipped work voice that never sounded like her real one. So when she got distant, I explained it for her. When she pulled away in bed, I told myself she was mentally exhausted. When she stopped leaning into me on the couch, I figured she just needed space after a long day. When I kissed the back of her neck one night while she was doing dishes and she let out this irritated little breath, I actually apologized. That part still bothers me. Not because apologizing was wrong, but because I did it so fast. Like I already knew the rules had changed and was trying to avoid making things worse. She didn't even turn around. She just said she had too much on her mind and could not do this right now. Could not do this. Like I was not her husband touching her lightly in our kitchen. Like I was one more task waiting for her. After that, I started noticing how often she reacted to me like I had shown up at the wrong time. If I touched her lower back while passing behind her, she'd shift forward before I really made contact. If I sat close enough for our legs to touch on the couch, she'd gather a blanket around herself. If I kissed her goodbye in the morning and let it last a second too long, she already seemed mentally somewhere else by the time I pulled back. None of it was big enough to call out without sounding weak. But small things repeated over and over stopped feeling small. The worst part was bedtime. That was where I felt the distance most clearly. Megan used to fall asleep pressed against me without thinking. Her foot would find my leg under the blankets. Her hand would land on my chest if she was half asleep. Even silence between us used to feel shared. Now she brought her phone to bed every night and held it at an angle away from me. She would scroll until she looked tired, then set it down, turn onto her side, and create this quiet little wall with her whole body. I got so used to it that I started adjusting before she even did. That's the humiliation no one warns you about. The moment you stop moving naturally around your own spouse. The moment you start editing harmless affection so you do not feel rejected again. One Friday night, I finally tried to say something. Not in an accusing way. I just told her I missed her. We were in the living room. The TV was on, but neither of us was paying attention. Her laptop was open on the coffee table, and she had one eye on her inbox even though it was almost 9. I told her the house had started feeling strange lately. Like we were always near each other but never really together. I said I knew she was stressed, but I missed how easy we used to be. She closed her laptop slowly and asked why everything had to turn into a relationship conversation the second she got tired. That caught me off guard. I told her I was not trying to start anything. I just wanted to talk. She said there was nothing to talk about. She was busy, drained, and did not have the energy to constantly reassure me. That word hit me hard. Reassure me. I had not asked for reassurance. I had asked for closeness. But once she framed it that way, I felt myself shrinking in real time. That is how those conversations go sometimes. You come in with real pain and leave feeling needy for having it. So I dropped it. Not because I felt better. Because I could tell she wanted me to. That weekend, we went to her sister Claire's birthday dinner downtown. I almost did not go because things had been tense and I was tired of pretending in public. But Megan seemed unusually determined to be there. She changed outfits twice, redid part of her makeup, and took longer getting ready than I had seen her take for anything involving me in months. At dinner, she was different. Lighter. More alert. More alive. She laughed easily. Leaned into conversations. Touched Claire's arm when she was telling a story. Smiled with her full face instead of the distracted half version I had been getting at home. I sat across from her watching all of it and trying not to think about how quickly she seemed to come to life around other people. Then I noticed her phone. Not just that she checked it. The way she checked it. She would glance down under the table, read something, and get this quick private reaction on her face before smoothing it out. Once, when Claire got up to greet someone, Megan looked at her screen and smiled. A real smile. Small. Fast. Gone almost immediately. I saw it because by then I was already watching too closely. When she noticed me looking, she locked the phone and asked why I was staring at her. I said I wasn't. That was a lie. I was staring because the distance at home had started making every spark in her look suspicious, especially when I was not the one causing it. On the drive home, I tried one more time to reach her. I just said she seemed happier tonight. She looked out the window and said it was nice to be around people who were not always pulling on her for something. I gripped the steering wheel tighter after that. Because she probably meant work. Family. Life. Everything. But I knew I was inside that sentence too. Just another person taking from her. Just another demand. When we got home, she kicked off her heels and went upstairs. I followed a minute later, slower, still hoping maybe the evening had softened something between us. She was in the bathroom taking off her earrings when I stepped behind her and put my hand lightly on her waist. She looked at me in the mirror. Annoyed. Then she took my hand off her and said she was exhausted and not in the mood to be touched. Not in the mood to be touched. That was the part I could not stop replaying. Because it was bigger than intimacy. Bigger than sex. It made even basic closeness sound unreasonable. I nodded and said goodnight. Then I sat on the edge of our bed for a long time while the shower ran in the next room, trying to convince myself this was still stress. Still burnout. Still something normal couples worked through if they just gave it time. That should have been the moment I admitted something was wrong. Instead, I kept trying to explain it away. Until Monday afternoon. Megan had gotten home from work, dropped her purse on the kitchen chair, and gone upstairs to change. A minute later, her phone lit up on the counter beside me. I was not trying to snoop. I only looked because the screen was facing up and the message preview flashed before it went dark. I did not recognize the name. But I saw the text. You looked good tonight. Wish we had more time. I stared at the message until the screen went dark. You looked good tonight. Wish we had more time. That was all I got. No context. No emoji. No name I recognized. Just one line that turned every ugly feeling I had been trying to suppress into something heavier. Megan came back downstairs a few seconds later in gray sweatpants and one of my old t-shirts. She looked comfortable. Familiar. Like the same woman I had spent 13 years with. That might have been the worst part. How normal she looked while my brain was trying to decide whether I had just seen the beginning of the end of my marriage. She picked up her phone, glanced at the screen, and for 1 second her expression changed. It was quick. Too quick for anyone who wasn't already watching for signs. Then she locked the screen and asked what I wanted for dinner. That moment stuck with me all night. Not just the message. Her face after reading it. That flicker of awareness. Not surprise exactly. More like calculation. Like she was adjusting herself before I could ask a question. I didn't ask one. Not because I wasn't tempted. Because I knew how it would go. She would say it was nothing. A coworker. A joke. A harmless comment taken the wrong way. And without more than one message on a screen, I would end up sounding like a paranoid husband spiraling over a sentence. So I said nothing and hated the silence anyway. Dinner was quiet. Megan talked a little about work, but only in broad strokes. Client feedback. A campaign delay. Something about a vendor mistake. I nodded when I was supposed to, but my mind kept replaying the words from that text and fitting them into every strange moment from the last few months. You looked good tonight. Not today. Not earlier. Tonight. That meant someone had seen her recently. Someone who felt comfortable enough saying it directly. Someone who thought wish we had more time was normal. That last part was what kept getting under my skin. More time for what? By bedtime, I had worked myself into that awful space where every possibility feels both obvious and unprovable. Megan brought her phone upstairs like she always did now and kept it in her hand while brushing her teeth. When she got into bed, she angled the screen away from me and smiled once at something before quickly smoothing her face back to neutral. I noticed. She noticed me noticing. Then she set the phone down and turned away without saying goodnight. I barely slept. The next morning, I told myself I needed to stay calm and pay attention instead of forcing a confrontation too early. If I was wrong, I would damage something already fragile. If I was right, accusing her without more would only make her careful. So I started watching. Not obsessively at first. Just enough to see whether what I'd been feeling really had a shape. Tuesday morning, she left for work earlier than usual. She said traffic had been bad all week and she wanted to get in before her first meeting. Fine. Reasonable. But she also put more effort into getting ready than she had for months. Better blouse. More makeup. Hair done before coffee instead of after. Again, maybe nothing. But once doubt gets in, even ordinary details stop feeling innocent. That night she came home late and claimed the office had turned chaotic because a client kept changing direction. She looked tired, but not the way she looked tired with me. Not drained. More keyed up. Like her body was still carrying the energy of something. While we ate, her phone buzzed twice on the counter. She did not check it the first time. She checked it the second time immediately. Her whole face softened for half a second, and then she stood up, took the plate to the sink, and answered from there with her back to me. I asked who it was. She said work. One word flat. Efficient. End of discussion. I remember staring at the back of her shoulders while she typed and thinking how strange it is that betrayal rarely begins with one huge moment. It begins with your own home starting to feel slightly off in ways you can explain without sounding desperate. Wednesday was worse. Megan texted around 5:30 saying not to wait for her because Claire had asked her to stop by and help look over something for a school fundraiser. Claire did volunteer work constantly, so it sounded believable. Still, something in me resisted it. Maybe because Claire usually called, not texted through Megan. Maybe because Megan had already been weird for weeks and now every excuse sounded rehearsed whether it was or not. She got home after 9. I asked how Claire was. Megan kicked off her shoes and said stressed, then launched into a vague explanation about decorations and donation baskets that sounded like she was building it as she spoke. Nothing specific. Nothing concrete. Just enough filler to make the story feel normal. Then, while she was hanging up her coat, I asked one simple thing. I asked whether Claire's husband Tom was there too. Megan paused. Only for a second, but I saw it. Then she said no, he was working late. That answer sat wrong immediately, because Tom works early mornings and is almost never out late. I know that because he complains about waking up before dawn every time I see him. Again, not proof. Just one more crack. Later that night, Megan took a shower and left her purse on the bedroom chair. I would like to say I ignored it. I didn't. I didn't tear through it. I didn't dump it out like a man in a rage. I just looked inside while the shower was running and felt ashamed even as I did it. Wallet. Lipstick. Receipts. Gum. Pen. The normal contents of a normal purse. Then I found a folded receipt from a wine bar downtown. Time-stamped 7:48 p.m. same night she had supposedly been at Claire's house. I held that receipt in my hand and felt something turn cold inside me. Not anger first. Clarity. Because now I had two things that did not fit. A message from a man I didn't know. A lie about where she had been. Not suspicion. Not insecurity. A lie. I put everything back exactly where I found it. When Megan came out of the shower, she was wrapped in a towel, steam still following her into the bedroom, moving around me like nothing in the room had changed. I sat on the edge of the bed and asked how long she stayed at Claire's. She said a couple hours. I asked where they ordered food from, since I figured fundraiser planning at dinner time usually came with takeout. She blinked once, then said they didn't eat. That was when I knew she was improvising. I looked at her and almost confronted her right there. Almost held up the receipt and forced the truth into the room. But something stopped me. Maybe instinct. Maybe fear. Maybe the realization that if she could lie this smoothly standing 3 feet from me in a towel, then I still didn't understand how deep this went. So I just nodded. Thursday, I called Claire. I hated doing it. Hated how sneaky it felt. But I needed to know if I was losing my mind or finally seeing straight. I made it casual. Told her I had forgotten to ask Megan what time we were supposed to meet up Saturday for her birthday leftovers because I thought she mentioned Claire might invite us over. It was a weak setup, but it got me where I needed. Claire sounded confused. She said she hadn't seen Megan since the birthday dinner. I thanked her, made some stupid excuse, and hung up. That call ended the last little pocket of denial I had been holding onto. After that, I started noticing more. How Megan no longer left her phone face up around me. How she took it into the bathroom even for quick showers. How she smiled at texts and then looked irritated the second I entered the room, like I was interrupting something she wanted back. How she suddenly cared more about weekday outfits, earrings, perfume. How she still acted tired around me, but never dull when she thought someone else might be waiting. Friday night, things got worse in a way I could not explain away. We were at home. Quiet evening. TV on. She was curled on one end of the couch with a blanket over her legs, phone in hand. I was on the other end pretending to watch some crime show while my attention kept drifting toward her. Her screen lit up. I saw the name this time. Evan. She read the message, smiled to herself, and stood up immediately. I asked who Evan was. She turned too fast. Then she said he was just someone from work helping on a campaign launch. Just someone. I asked why just someone from work was texting her at 9:30 on a Friday night. Her face hardened right away. She said not everything in her life was suspicious just because I was in a mood lately. Then she took the phone into the kitchen, as if distance would make the question disappear. I sat there listening to the faint sound of her typing in the other room and understood something that hurt more than I expected. This was no longer just distance. Megan was hiding a version of her life from me. And whatever Evan was to her, he had more access to her attention than I did. When she came back, she acted like nothing had happened. Sat down. Pulled the blanket back over herself. Asked if I wanted popcorn. I looked at her and realized I did not know what part of her was real anymore. Then, around 11, after she had gone upstairs early, I heard her phone buzz again. A minute later, I heard the soft click of the back door opening. I stayed still for about 3 seconds after I heard the back door open. Just long enough to wonder if I had imagined it. Then I muted the TV, and the house went quiet in that heavyweight houses do late at night, when every small sound feels louder than it should. The refrigerator humming. The air vent pushing softly. And somewhere beyond the kitchen, the faint sound of the back door clicking shut again. Megan had not said goodnight. She had not said she was stepping outside. She had just gotten up after another late message from Evan and slipped out the back like she was following an instinct stronger than caution. I stood up slowly and crossed the living room without turning on any extra lights. By the time I reached the kitchen, the backyard was dark except for the weak glow from the patio fixture over the deck. Through the glass, I could see Megan standing near the far railing with her phone to her ear. She had one arm folded across herself. Her head was lowered. Even from inside, I could tell this was not a casual work call. She stayed out there maybe 2 minutes. Maybe 3. Not long enough to have a full conversation. Long enough to say something privately. Long enough to choose distance. Then she ended the call, stood still for a second, and came back in. I stepped away from the door before she saw me. By the time she walked into the living room, I was back on the couch with the TV on, though I could not have told you what was playing. She looked at me for half a second, almost like she was checking whether I had noticed anything. Then she said she had gone out for air because the house felt stuffy. I nodded like I believed her. That was the night something changed in me for real. Up until then, I had still been trying to preserve some version of innocence. Even with the message. Even with the receipt. Even after Claire confirmed Megan had lied. There was still a part of me stupid enough to hope this would collapse into something smaller than it looked. But women do not sneak outside at 11 o'clock to talk to just someone from work because the house feels stuffy. That was not work. That was secrecy. And secrecy only matters when the truth matters too much to say inside. I barely slept. Megan came to bed later than I did and slid in quietly, facing away from me as usual. I lay there staring into the dark, listening to her breathing even out, and started replaying the last few months in a different order. Once you stop assuming innocence, everything rearranges itself fast. The distance. The irritation. The way she made me feel like I was always catching her at the wrong time. The extra effort with clothes and makeup on nights that supposedly meant nothing. The smile at her phone. The text. The receipt. The lie. It all started looking less like random strain and more like a life that had split in two. Saturday morning, Megan acted normal. That almost made it worse. She came downstairs in leggings and a sweatshirt, made coffee, asked whether I wanted eggs, and moved around the kitchen with that easy domestic rhythm that should have comforted me. Instead it made me feel like I was standing across from someone who could lie beautifully because she knew the power of ordinary behavior. I kept my voice steady and told her I had to run a few errands later. She said she might use the afternoon to catch up on work. Of course she would. That answer covered everything now. Work had become this clean little shield she could hide behind any time she needed privacy. Around noon, while she was upstairs showering, I did something I had been avoiding because I knew once I did it, I would cross a line in myself I could not uncross. I checked the phone bill. We were on the same plan, and I still had the login from years ago. My hands were colder than they should have been while I signed in. Part of me wanted to find nothing. Or at least nothing clear. Something that would let me hate myself for being suspicious and move on. Instead, I found Evan's number. Repeated over and over. Calls during the day. Fine. Texts in the evenings. Worse. Clusters late at night. Worse than that. And one called just after 11 the night before, exactly when Megan slipped out the back door. I sat there staring at the screen until the digits blurred. That should have been enough. For any sane man, it probably would have been enough. But once your marriage starts feeling unreal, you crave certainty in a way that almost feels physical. Not because it hurts less. Because at least pain with edges is easier to hold than confusion. So I started paying attention harder. That afternoon, Megan said she was going to a coffee shop to work because she needed to get out of the house. I told her okay. She kissed my cheek on the way out, which almost made me flinch because it felt so suddenly generous. Like she was feeding the version of me that still wanted to trust her. I waited 10 minutes, then grabbed my keys. I hated myself the entire drive. I told myself I was only verifying the lie. That if she really was at a coffee shop, I would turn around, go home, and never do anything like this again. But I already knew I would not find her there. Some part of me knew before I even pulled into the lot. Her car was not outside the cafe she mentioned. I checked anyway. Walked past the windows like I was heading somewhere else. No Megan. From there, instinct took over more than logic. I drove downtown toward the wine bar on the receipt from Wednesday and parked half a block away because I did not know what else to do with the dread building in my chest. Her car was there. Parked in a side lot behind the row of storefronts. I sat gripping the steering wheel until my palms hurt. Maybe she was meeting a client. A friend. Anyone. But then I saw him. Evan. I did not know it was him at first, not for sure. I only knew because Megan had once mentioned an Evan from work in passing months earlier, before the secrecy began. Something about a campaign deadline. Nothing memorable. But when he stepped out onto the sidewalk and looked toward the side entrance like he was waiting for someone, I knew exactly who he had to be. Tall. Mid-30s maybe. Dark jacket. Relaxed posture. The kind of man who looked comfortable in his own timing. And then Megan came out. She was smiling before she even fully reached him. Not big. Not reckless. Just soft and real in a way I had not seen directed at me in a long time. They did not kiss. That would have almost been easier. Instead, they stood too close. He said something and she laughed quietly, head tilted down. Then he touched her elbow, and she did not move away. They walked toward the corner together like they had done it before. That elbow touch destroyed me more than it should have. Because it was casual. Familiar. Unthinking. You do not touch someone like that unless the distance between you has already changed. I stayed there maybe 5 minutes, maybe less. I do not remember driving home. I only remember the strange stillness inside me. Not rage. Not yet. Something flatter. Like shock had burned off the top layer of emotion and left only function. When Megan got home later, she had a coffee in her hand from a place nowhere near the cafe she claimed she was going to. She started telling me some story about not getting enough done because it was noisy there, and I just watched her speak. That was the worst part. How smoothly the lie came out. How naturally she built details around it. I nodded in the right places. Asked 1 or 2 questions to hear how far she would go. She answered all of them without blinking. Then she changed into comfortable clothes, curled up on the couch, and acted like we were having a normal Saturday evening. I think that was when the grief really started. Not at the sight of her with him. At the realization that she had already become someone else with me. Sunday made it worse. We went to Claire's for lunch because apparently the world still expected us to function. Megan was warm there too. Engaged. Funny. Present. She helped clear plates, laughed with Claire in the kitchen, touched my shoulder once in front of everyone like we were fine. That public version of her almost made me angry enough to shake. Because I realized she still knew how to perform closeness when it benefited her. On the drive home, her phone buzzed twice in the cup holder. She flipped it over so fast it nearly hit the gear shift. I said nothing. That evening, after she went upstairs, I stood in the kitchen and stared at the dark window over the sink while the house settled around me. I had the phone records. I had the lie about Claire. I had seen her with Evan. I had enough to know what was happening, even if I still did not know how far it had gone. Then her phone buzzed again on the counter where she had forgotten it. This time, the preview stayed long enough for me to read it. Miss you already. Next time, no rushing. I stared at the message until the screen dimmed. Miss you already. Next time, no rushing. That was it. No room left for denial. No room left for one more explanation, one more convenient lie, one more version of Megan telling me I was reading too much into things. I had the message from Monday. I had the receipt from the wine bar. I had Claire confirming Megan was never with her. I had the phone bill. I had seen Megan with Evan with my own eyes. And now I had this. Miss you already. Not work. Not friendly. Not harmless. I stood there in the kitchen with her phone buzzing faintly in my hand and felt something inside me go completely still. Not calm. Not forgiveness. Just the end of confusion. A few seconds later I heard Megan coming down the stairs. I set the phone back on the counter exactly where it had been and stepped away. My heart was pounding hard enough to make my hands shake, but my face felt strangely flat. She walked into the kitchen barefoot, hair still damp from washing her face, and stopped when she saw me standing there. For 1 second, neither of us said anything. Then she looked at the counter. Then at me. And she knew. I asked one question. I asked who Evan was to her. She tried to recover fast. Said he was a co-worker. Said I already knew that. Said why was I asking like that? I told her because co-workers do not text married women that they miss them already and wish they had more time. Everything in her face changed. Not outrage. Not confusion. Not that immediate offended reaction innocent people reach for when they've been falsely accused. She just went quiet. That silence told me more than anything else could have. I asked if she wanted to keep lying to me. She sat down slowly at the kitchen table, like her legs had gone weak. I stayed standing. I think part of me knew if I sat down too, the moment might turn soft, and I could not afford soft. Not after all the weeks she had let me feel like a burden while she gave someone else the best parts of herself. I told her I knew about Claire. I told her I found the wine bar receipt. I told her I checked the phone records. Then I told her I saw her with Evan downtown. That was the first moment real panic showed up in her face. Not because she felt guilty enough to confess right away. Because she realized the structure of the lie was gone. All the little escape routes she had built were closing at once. She started crying. I wish I could say that moved me. It didn't. Because those tears came after the evidence, not before it. After the corner, not after the choice. She said it was not what I thought. That line almost made me laugh. Not because anything was funny. Because there is something obscene about hearing the oldest lie in the world while standing in the wreckage of your own marriage. I asked her what exactly I was supposed to think. That the man texting her late at night about missing her was helping with marketing strategy? That sneaking outside to call him at 11 meant nothing? That meeting him at a wine bar while telling me she was with her sister was some innocent misunderstanding? She cried harder than and said she had not meant for it to go this far. That sentence hit me harder than I expected. Not meant to. As if betrayal just gathers momentum on its own. As if she had simply slipped and kept slipping until she landed in another man's attention by accident. I asked how long. She covered her face with both hands and said it started a couple months earlier. At first it was just talking at work. Then texting. Then lunches. Then drinks after work. She said Evan made her feel seen. He listened. He noticed when she was stressed. He made her feel exciting again. Exciting. I remember repeating that word back to her because I wanted to make sure I had heard it right. I asked whether that was why every time I reached for her, she acted like I was interrupting something more important. Because she was already giving that part of herself to him. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. I asked whether it had gotten physical. That was the only question she hesitated on. Then she nodded. Just once. It felt like getting hit somewhere deep and private. Not because I didn't already know where this was going. Because hearing it and knowing it are two different kinds of pain. One is suspicion. The other is truth entering the room and refusing to leave. I asked how many times. She said a few. A few. That word lodged in my chest like glass. Because it made something devastating sound administrative. Like she was counting expenses. Like what she had done could be softened by rounding down. I turned away from her for a second because I honestly thought if I kept looking at her, I might either break down or say something I could not take back. The kitchen suddenly felt too small. The walls too close. Every ordinary object around us felt insulting. The coffee maker. The fruit bowl. The stupid dish towel over the oven handle. All the props of a normal marriage sitting there while ours bled out on the tile. When I looked back at her, she was still crying. She said she had been unhappy for a while. Said she felt like her whole life had become obligation. Work. Family. Routines. Pressure. She said with Evan, she got to feel like a different version of herself. That was when anger finally got all the way through. Because for months she had made me feel wrong for wanting closeness. Like I was the one adding pressure. Like my love was one more thing weighing her down. Meanwhile, she had energy for secret texts, drinks, private calls, and another man's hands on her. I told her she did not get to blame unhappiness for cruelty. She started saying my name, but I cut her off. I told her the affair was not the only betrayal. The real betrayal started earlier. It started when she let me keep reaching for her while she already knew she was somewhere else. When she looked annoyed by my touch because she had started reserving that warmth for him. When she turned my confusion into neediness and my patience into something she could hide behind. That was the first time she stopped trying to explain and just cried. I went upstairs and pulled a duffel bag out of the closet. She followed me at first, asking me not to leave angry, asking if we could please talk in the morning, asking if 13 years was really how I wanted to end this. That question almost took me out. Because I was not the one who ended 13 years. I just happened to be the one standing there when the truth finally stopped pretending. I packed enough for a few days. Jeans, shirts, charger, toiletries. The basics. My hands were steady by then. Too steady. Like my body had decided emotion was a luxury for later. At the bedroom door, Megan asked if I still loved her. I looked at her for a long time before answering. Then I told her love was never the problem. I left that night and checked into a hotel off the highway 10 minutes away. The room smelled like bleach and stale air conditioning. I sat on the edge of the bed in the same clothes I had left the house in and stared at the wall until sunrise. The next morning, I called a lawyer before I called anyone else. After that, everything moved fast in the practical sense and slow in the emotional one. Papers. Conversations. Family finding out in pieces. Claire calling me crying because Megan had finally told her the truth. Evan disappearing from the picture the second the affair had consequences outside the fantasy. That part did not surprise me. Men like that love intimacy when it is stolen. They rarely want it once it costs something. People always think cheating is one big dramatic moment. It isn't. By the time I got proof, the marriage had already been dying in smaller ways. In the flinch when I touched her. In the sigh when I kissed her neck. In the irritation on her face every time I asked for what used to be natural between us. Megan did not just cheat on me. She made me feel like I was interrupting her real life. The truth was, I was. Because while I was still trying to save our marriage, she had already started living outside it.